Well, there's absolutely no excuse for this. Let's begin. Okay, well, we've got a lot to get through today, so let's start with our first story. And that is, according to this article, Morrisons, who obviously quite a lot of people trust with their home shopping, has decided to do something which hopefully no other supermarket will even dare to do. And that is, substitutions. Well, according to this article, a Morrisons shopper has found a bottle of urine in his home delivery. That's right, a bottle of pee. I mean, if anything, is surely taking a pee by itself, but also there's just no excuse for it, is there? I mean, yes, admittedly, supermarkets occasionally have to substitute an item or two when they don't have it in stock, but that presumably is placed within the crates inside the van, and therefore when the driver takes it out, any substitutions are either in a bag by themselves or surely noted down. But to be honest, if anything, it does make me question how stringent their order checking process is, especially if, I don't know, it was handed to them during the delivery process. But the article says that when asked if the bottle actually did contain urine, Adam joked that his wife had used her nurse sense on it to determine its contents. And sharing the picture on X, of course formerly known as Twitter, as they just love to say nowadays, he said, "Dear Morrisons, you're normally quite good about telling us about your substitutions in our shopping, but you didn't alert us to your substitution of a bottle of urine, instead, of course, of my unspoken request not to be sent a bottle of urine. And unfortunately, part of that delivery was also intended to apparently go to a local charity, so can you imagine if he didn't actually check it and then turned up with this and said something like, here you go, this is for the homeless or whatever, and then they found half a bottle of pee? Well, to be honest, in which case, I doubt any of his future donations would have been welcome at all. But this isn't the first time that we've heard of pee being in bottles, is it? I mean, apparently Amazon, I think it was, I mean, I could be wrong, but from what I heard, their drivers, admittedly not all of their drivers, but some of their drivers apparently stop wherever instead of actually going to the toilet and peeing in a bottle instead. So it just makes me wonder if some of Morrisons' drivers do that as well. I don't know, somewhere down the line, their driver might have made a little sneaky switch and hopes no one noticed. But then again, of course, I could be wrong. But of course, don't worry, because a Morrison spokesperson said that we are extremely disappointed to hear about this incident and have been in touch with the customer to offer them a full refund on their shopping order. Well, to be honest, I don't know about you, but I'd expect much more than a full refund. I'd expect some sort of compensation, because why should I have someone else's pee in my house, let alone in my substitutions? They continue, though, it is completely unacceptable and we are carrying out a full investigation into what has happened. And also, it does raise concerns about their welfare of their delivery driver, doesn't it? Especially if they have to go to the toilet in a milk bottle rather than designated toilets. And I'm not saying that is the case, but it does make you wonder, doesn't it? In my opinion, it's absolutely disgusting. There's no excuse for it, and compensation should be offered. Because let's face it, if it happened to me, I wouldn't exactly be shopping there again. Next up, it looks like Rishi may soon be caving in much earlier than he thought, and because, according to this article, he has said he is apparently willing to speak to Tory rebels about potential amendments to the flagship Rwanda bill, about how it could be improved and made even more effective. Or to be honest, I think the best way that could be improved is if we actually just leave the ECHR completely instead of doing the bill in the first place, but that's just me. There is a catch though to his caving, and that apparently is that any amendments to the bill must have a respectable legal argument and must maintain Rwanda's participation within the scheme. But the thing is, apparently right-wing Tories have said that this is not correct and want the government to go further in order to close down the options migrants have to appeal, which in my opinion would surely make more sense, wouldn't it? Because let's face it, half of the time, or actually the majority of the time, the deportation flights will ever get cancelled is because people want to appeal, isn't it? And this bill doesn't exactly change that. I mean, from what I've heard, it says something along the lines that in general, people have to go to Rwanda because A, B or C, but apparently individual people can appeal this and say, well, that is the case, but this is not right for me because... So in which case the bill is probably about as workable as a chocolate teacup. And whilst of course Rishi's lawyers will say things like the bill is hardline enough to work and things like that, it's all about putting that to the test, isn't it? So therefore, if it does work, then great. But if it doesn't, then Rishi will surely have to fall on his sword, wouldn't he? Because presumably any credibility, if you can call it that he has left will long since be gone, won't it? Along with, of course, any hopes of his election win, because let's face it, the polls have been going down every month from what I've heard since he's actually got into Downing Street. Next up, we've got some quite worrying news for us drivers out there, and that is because, according to this article, Bonkers new parking rules could see diesel drivers pay up to 10 times more to park than EVs. I mean, surely it's just absolutely disgraceful, isn't it? Apparently, unlucky diesel drivers are said to be hammered with additional costs in parts of London, thanks, of course, to fresh changes. Well, I wonder what that is. No doubt, of course, there's probably bound to be something tacked on to ULEZ. Or maybe not, because it does say that Greenwich Council is charging owners of the most polluting vehicles, apparently, up to £7 an hour for on-street parking. Whereas in comparison, of course, owners of zero-emissions vehicles, like electric cars for example, could apparently pay as little as 70p an hour to park in the London Borough. And I personally think that is wrong. I mean, are they trying to eliminate all cars completely? And of course, I don't know about you, but I think it's absolutely absurd that someone who is, I know, more than likely have to pay £12.50 a day to get into the London Borough in the first place, now has to cough up an additional £7 per hour just because he's still driving a diesel. I mean, surely if he's been given the right by paying the £12.50 to enter London, then that should be enough for him to pay, shouldn't it? And therefore, surely all parking charges should be the same for any type of car, no matter what you drive. It shouldn't have to be placed again on more environmental standards. And in which case, when the environmental standards of ULEZ get up to bit, which let's face it, they more than likely will do before the 2035 deadline when new petrol or diesel cars are banned, apparently, it just makes me wonder if these fees are also going to rise as well. But let's just see how they can get around it. Because you'd like to think, wouldn't you, that something like this would be all over the news channels, but let's face it, no! They tend to like to promote things like EVs and things like that, don't they? And the way they're getting around it is quite sneaky in my opinion, because it is not on a parking machine according to this. It says that drivers are being charged a tiered parking rates based on how much carbon dioxide their vehicles emit. They will also be forced to pay £300 for a resident parking permit, and a staggering £825 for a business permit, both of which last 12 months. So it's not an hourly parking charge, it's the permits which gets them. So they have to pay for ULEZ and now permits. But it gets worse than that, because some Greenwich residents are being made to pay an extra £280 for parking permits on top of that, with prices ranging from £20 to as much as £300. But of course, if you've got an EV, this compares to just £55 for the most environmentally friendly vehicles. And that's probably not just EVs, it's probably the lower emissions cars as well, but it's just absurd in my opinion. There's just no excuse for it. It's bound to be pushing loads more people to think that, you know, I can't actually work my business from London, I'll go elsewhere, or might do what Sadiq Khan probably hopes and push people to actually abandon driving their own cars and actually use the tube instead, which no doubt of course it's absolutely love. But get this, because there are currently apparently 4,000 drivers are issued fines daily relating to ULEZ, with registration plates being read by between 75 and 80 million times a day by Sadiq Khan's surveillance camera network, which, let's face it, is going to bring him even more money in, isn't it? So why are we still paying as much for the tube then, Sadiq, eh? Surely if you want everyone to go by that, wouldn't it be a better plan to actually reduce the rates on them? But in this day and age, we shouldn't actually be forced, in my opinion, to travel one way or another. It's up to us. If we want to own a car, we should be able to drive that car. And the only thing that should mean that your car is able to go on the road, in my opinion, would be its MOT certificate, not about how environmentally friendly it is or isn't. At the end of the day, at the moment, London and everywhere else in the UK is bound to have more cleaner air than what it did, let's face it, a century or 2 centuries ago, when everyone was lighting fires in their houses just to keep warm, or for candlelights, or for whatever else. And just think how much carbon dioxide that put in the atmosphere, eh? Of course, I don't know about you, but I personally think this next article is quite worrying, because as a percentage, how many illegal boat people, or future Labour voters as I like to call them, do you think has been sent back since 2020? 10%? 7%? 5%? Well, if you answered any of them, I'm afraid you're wrong. It is a grand total, apparently, of 1. That's right, 1%. Which surely means that's a massive advert for people, isn't it? That basically 99% of illegal boat people are more than likely going to stay over here when they arrive, which I knew it was a lot, but to be honest, I didn't think it was 99%. What sort of deterrent is that? And yes, I know they're trying to reverse that with the whole emergency legislation or whatever they're trying to get through at the moment, but from what I've heard, it seems like that bill has got more loopholes in than a packet of hula hoops. So when it's added to statistics like this, it just makes a mockery of our whole points-based system completely, doesn't it? And the article says that the numbers show that when Albanians were taken out of the figures, as the UK has signed a separate returns agreement apparently with the country, just 408 have been sent home in the past 3 years, despite 109,117 arriving via Channel crossings, an equivalent of, wait for this, even worse, 0.37%. Not even 0.5%. Is just absolutely disgraceful, isn't it? If people want to come here, they should do so legally and actually go through our points-based system, not try to take some sort of shortcut. Or even worse, might think, oh, I can't get through that way because I got this criminal record. I'll just pay someone to get me through, and that should not be allowed to happen. We should be taking Australia's style approach that their then Prime Minister Tony Abbott did and just say, if you come through this method, I'm sorry, but we're not going to be able to accept you because too many people have taken advantage of it. And let's face it, at the end of the day, France hardly is at war, is it? So therefore, that is bound to be deemed as a safe country, isn't it? And I know, yes, some people will say, well, they might not want to be in France. Well, at the end of the day, if they're fleeing from war or whatever it is that they're saying, then surely they'd happy to be in a safe country, wouldn't they? They shouldn't be able to pick and choose what safe country they want to be in. They should be happy that they're actually now safe. And surely figures like this are bound to have an impact on our public services, aren't they? Because even though they aren't allowed to work whilst their application is going through, they might need things like the police or the ambulance or doctors or whatever else, and therefore it's those services which are going to be crumbling under the result, isn't it? But of course, don't worry, because the government's new illegal immigration minister, Michael Tomlinson, said that he wanted to see the return figure as high as possible, adding, I am reading the same chart, and as far as I'm concerned, the numbers need to be significantly higher than that. Well done, I'm glad someone sees sense. Maybe, I don't know, he should go on Mastermind. Specialist subject, the bloody obvious. Because let's face it, it is, isn't it? It is good that he's addressing this, but at the end of the day, surely it should be a lot higher than that, and it shouldn't need a report like this to give him a virtual kick up the bum, should it? But the figures were apparently handed over to the committee late on Tuesday in a letter from the Home Office Permanent Secretary, Sir Matthew Roycroft. He appeared in front of the cross-party group of MPs 2 weeks ago, but was attacked for being disrespectful by its chair, Dame Diana Johnson, when he struggled to answer questions on the specifics of immigration statistics. The Labour chair had then chosen Sir Matthew for answers which only appeared the night before Wednesday's hearing and which neither Mr Tomlinson or Miss Pursgrove appeared to be aware of.